Good afternoon, everyone. Let us start with our session 3. Uh, First, I'll be talking about the various questions which are asked in both the groups by the participants. Right. Group 1 has more number of questions as compared to group 2. So I will try to cover these questions initially. Then we can have further question if any. Right. With due permission from all of you, if we would like to record this session so that later on we can share the link of this session also with you participants. So let me first take you to, I have to present my screen. So let me first I hope the screen is visible to everyone. Right. So to be very frank with you, certain questions which we have received are beyond the scope of this webinar, right? Out of the scope of this webinar, still I'll be trying to cover and answer those questions, basics, right? I'll not go in detail, but at least give some hint to the answer so that the respected participant can have certain idea about the query. Right. So, welcome to session 3, national webinar on basics of SPSS in social science, organized by Anant Education Foundation. Let us see some questions. There was one question like, do tests such as SEM, that is structural equation modeling, require normality test? Right. So, structural equation modeling, definitely you need to check normality test. Right. Normality of observation is the first and important assumption before building the model and checking its fit indexes in structural equation modeling. Right. So normality is very much important. Right. Especially you can see there are two methods which are very popular when you run structural equation modeling. Right. That is, one is maximum likelihood method, ML. It is known as ML, maximum likelihood method of approximation. So when you have a normal data, right, you can go for structural equation modeling while running the model, and while estimating the model, you can use this method, maximum likelihood method, if the data are normal. But if your data are not normal, that doesn't mean you cannot at all run structural equation modeling. Right. There is another method developed and available with structural equation modeling, that is asymptotic distribution free, that is ADF method. Right. If your data is not normal, then you can still go for structural equation modeling and use this method to run your test and basically build your model based on this method. As we discussed during our session 2 and session 1, that generally the non-parametric methods or the other method are not that parametric methods or those, but still you can go ahead with this. So SEM normality is desired, is needs to be checked, but if no normality is available, there is another way out, and that you can use, that I shown you here, ADF method. Right. Suppose you are not convinced with this, then there is another option you have, that is to go for another software, that is smart PLS. Right. The method is known as PLS SEM, partial least square structural equation modeling. Right. Here the basic assumption of this technique is itself that no normality is required. Right. So here the basic assumption of normality is directly removed. So here you need not to check whether your data is normal or not normal. Right. So you can go for PLS SEM, that is a smart PLS software, right? And you can run the same model which you were planning to run in structural equation modeling. Right. There are certain other advantages also of this particular software, like it can allow even the small sample. right? And even it can run with nominal ordinal data and a single item scale also it can be performed, right? So PLS SCM is another way out, right? If you do not find your data to be normal and don't want to apply ADF method. So this was question number, that was one question. Another, the same question for factor analysis, correlation and regression. That means the normality test to be done, right? So yes, for regression you have to check the normality, right? If you see basically relation between regression and structural equation, you can simply say that normality structural equation is multiple regression. In multiple regression you have one dependent variable and probably multiple independent variable, but when you run structural equation modeling, it is basically running more than one multiple regression models within the same. So the basic assumption that you will be having for regression structural equation modeling would also follow the same assumptions, because it is nothing but multiplying the model, right? As far as correlation and factor analysis concerned, normality is not need to be checked, right? Factor analysis is more concerned with sample adequacy, and it should sample should be adequate so that you can test with KMO value, right? So here you need not to go for normality check, right? Correlation, as far as concerned, suppose you are concerned about the normality and running correlation, as such it is not required. Still you in correlation you have there is some noise which is coming. Request participant to kindly mute, right? Still you have option to study correlation through Spearman's correlation coefficient instead of Pearson correlation efficient. While I explain you parametric and non-parametric test, I show you the version of parametric correlation method and the non-parametric in that comparison chart. Right. So Pearson correlation coefficient is a parametric way of measuring, studying the correlation. While we talk about Spearman correlation, that Spearman basically goes for correlation with ranking. So it is also Spearman's rank correlation coefficient. So it is, you can use it is a non-parametric way. So no need to go for normality in this particular case. Right. So this is another one. And another question was, which type of data is better to collect, nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio? Right. So there are two ways to understand this: nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. As a researcher, when I want to apply statistical tests, as many tests I want to apply, we understood in the video, you can apply almost every test on ratio data. Right. Slightly limitations are there with interval, some more limitations with ordinal, and some more limitations with nominal, right? So as a researcher I would always tell you to collect ratio data, but it is not that easy, right? Because it is very good for the researcher to collect ratio data, but it is always not easy for respondent to give answer in ratio data. Right. Suppose you ask a temperature, you can ask a question like, as compared to yesterday, do you think today is a hotter day? Now, when you ask certain question, it is easy for respondent. He can tell you, yes, I think today is having a higher temperature as compared to yesterday. But you ask him in ratio, tell me what would be the yesterday's temperature, what would be today's temperature, or you can estimate the difference in temperature in morning and afternoon, right? So something, this is very difficult, as in majority of the question, right? Ratio data is not that much easy to collect, because it becomes difficult for the respondent to give answers, right? In certain cases respondent may not give you the correct answer. For example, I ask income, right, in monthly. If I ask income as a direct quantification question, that is direct numeric, I give blank space. I ask you, please write your income in personal detail. Right now, I have not given the range, I have not given the options, the brackets. I have kept it open. Right. So when I keep it open, what happens, the respondent may not be interested to give the exact figure of his income in front of me. So he may say that I am not interested, or he may give you a wrong figure. He may not give you the correct figure of income, right? If I convert this into brackets, probably it will give me nominal or ordinal data, but at least I will get the correct range, right? So better to collect interval and ratio as far as possible, but you should also check the ability of respondent to respond on a particular case. So that is how we can see. Plus another thing you need to consider, which kind of test you want to perform, right? That should be decided well in advance, as I mentioned in webinar also, that you should first decide which kind of test are you going to apply, and then you should think about which kind of question should I ask that will generate the kind of data I require. So this is that. Another question was, what does chi-square one sample test measure? Right. When we discuss this webinar, we discuss chi-square on two samples or more than two samples. Chi-square is available for one sample measure also. So chi-square, basically, when we talk about two sample, it is also known as association test. We saw the hypothesis also, there is no significant association, there is a significant association. So when you have more than one sample, right, it studies the association. But when you have only one sample, right, then chi-square is also known as goodness of fit test, right? Here chi-square tries to judge whether a sample fits a particular population well or not, right? So when we talk about chi-square one sample test, it talks about the whether the sample fits a particular population. It will not check association, because as there is one sample, you won't be able to check the association. But still chi-square will try to judge the goodness of fit of sample within the population, right? So that is how you can perform. It is also very easy to run. Now, as you know, the chi-square for two sample, chi-square for one sample, you can try in SPSS and you can run it. Right. So, what does chi-square? That these two questions are covered. Then another question was, in case of missing values, there might be situation where respondent has not answered to a question, and S and value is missing. Okay, how to handle that? Here I am assuming I don't want to reject his entire response sheet just because of one missing answer. Okay, so missing data is there. Even I show you the missing data. If it is there, how to check and how to identify, that technique we see. But here the question is, if we cannot at all identify what was this data and it is completely missing, it is not possible to find it out from the original questionnaire or the original data set, then how to handle that situation? And at the same time, here the participant is interested not to lose out on the response just because of one missing answer. Yes, so how we can deal? Basically, if I tell you this situation, you should take care in data preparation stage before starting the data analysis. First of all, when you go for data analysis, right, and after data collection is over, generally when you will see various studies, books and everything will talk about stages of research, then they will talk about data collection and they will talk about data analysis. But there is, in between them, there is one more important stage is there, that is known as data preparation. In our last webinar, questionnaire design and data preparation, we talked about this in detail, that how to do about it. In that also, again, there are certain steps like preliminary questionnaire screening and the editing, right? So this stage should be this particular missing data should be taken care at data preparation stage. So when we talk about data preparation stage, and some missing data is identified, then what should we do at that particular time? Here I don't want my missing data to be continuing till the time I go for data analysis, right? So what should I do? Some techniques are available, right, that I will share with you today, how to deal with this missing data. But as I tell you, there is no rule which technique should be used or which particular method only should be used. Ultimately, everything goes in researcher's discretion. Ultimately, with what you want to do with that missing data is ultimately your own discretion, right? So some techniques which are generally used in the world of research that I will share with you, right? But final decision will be researcher. There are no clear cut rule that if this is happening then this should only be done, right? So what are these techniques, some suggestions how to manage with missing data? So let us understand that. The best way is to contact the respondent and fill out the data. That is the best possible way you can do, right? As a participant in his question very clearly mentioned that there is only one data is missing. Probably let us see, understand either the data which is missing is probably with respect to some regular question or it may be personal detail, right? Personal detail, if it is missing, then if you can make out with other details, then it is okay. If not, you can call back the respondent if you have taken the number, if you have taken the email address, if you have taken the contact details of the respondent. If any our main questions and response is missing, you can call the respondent and request him to answer only this question. But this option is not possible if you have not collected any contact detail of the respondents, and in many cases we do not collect contact details of the respondents. So we probably don't know actually who has given me this response, right? So that is if we have not collected our in our research contact detail of respondent, then this option is not available with us. Then what should we do? Then second option you have is known as educated guess. You can go for educated guess. Now educated guess means it is still a guess but slightly rational and more qualified guess as compared to simply guessing the answer, right? So for related question assume the same answer, right? What how we can do? Suppose I am measuring attitude towards digital payment, right? So there must be certain positive statements about digital payment. There must be some negative statements about digital payment, right? So when I have measuring the attitude, I have a bunch of statements in and a bunch of statements having mix of statements, right? Positive statements and negative statements. Now suppose there is one statement is not answered by the respondent on a Likert scale, right? 1 to 5, strongly disagree to strongly agree. Now that is missed by the respondent. Now if I can check, suppose on positive statements, if the person has given positive responses, right, that means he is positive about digital payment. I have suppose 10 questions in which he has shown the positive intent, and the missing data is on positive statement, right? Then I can assume that as he is having positive intent toward digital payments on other statements, he must also be positive on this particular statement, right? So based on that I try to understand the attitude of person with other statements, and based on that I try to judge my answer. That is known as educated guess. Suppose he has shown negative responses on positive statements about digital payment, then I should understand the person is having negative attitude toward digital payment, so I should take educated guess accordingly. This is another way out. But to be very frank with you, guess will remain guess, right? So it may be possible you may not be able to get 100% accurate answer, but still you can go ahead with your data analysis and very nearer answer you are guessing, so chances of deviation are very low. Third, replace the missing value with mean, median or mode, right? So we understood in when we discussed nominal, ordinal, interval and ratio data, we discussed that when you have nominal data you cannot even calculate median and mean. You can simply calculate the mode. If you have ordinal data you cannot calculate mean, you can only calculate the median. But if you have ratio and interval data you can even calculate the mean, right? So the type of data which you are having in on which the value is missing, you can think about it, right? And if the value which is missing and the data collected on that value would be is suppose interval or ratio, so I must have got a mean of that particular value. So what I should do, I should go ahead with analysis, or I can calculate in Excel also of that particular column. Suppose in our sample questionnaire, let's understand question 4. In question 4 we have 5 statements, and suppose respondent has missed ticking on question number statement number 4, right? So I have an Excel file, right? So I simply have that column. I will calculate the mean of that column, and whatever the mean value comes, the nearer answer I will take. Suppose the mean value comes as 4.13, right? So now I cannot keep 4.13 in my response, because I have a response categories which are discrete in nature, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I cannot accommodate 4.13, but 4.13 I can compensate as 4. So I will take mean of other respondents on that particular statement, and the nearer value I will put. Suppose the value comes as 4.79, then I should take it as a 5. If value is 4.13, then I can take it as 4. This is how I can do with the mean if I have interval and ratio data. If I have median or mode, I can calculate accordingly. I can calculate median, I can calculate mode, and I can replace the missing value with the median or mode value. This is also an acceptable practice in research, right? That is another way you can do it. Then you have a middle point assumption. That is another researcher that at times, right? Suppose especially this is more applicable when you have a Likert scale kind of a statement, right? That I have asked a balance scale, and 1, 2, 3, 3 is neutral, neither agree nor disagree, right? 4 is against agree, and 5th is strongly agree. Now, I don't want my assumption to go to the either side, on agree side or on disagree side in missing data, because I feel if there is a data which is missing, right, and if I take it suppose as 4, that means I give weighted to agree. If I take it as 2, that means I give weighted to disagree. So here another option I have is I can keep it at number 3, middle point. So that will serve my purpose, two purposes. One, my missing data is also completed, and I am not creating bias on either side, either on agree side or on disagree side. So this is known as a middle point assumption, right? Some researcher prefer this method in order to avoid bias. If you go for this method, then earlier to educated guess and replace, you are having a different standpoint as a researcher, right? So this is what you can do with the missing data. If one or two missing data in that questionnaire, it is okay. That is point number one. Point number two, if you have too many missing data in the response sheet or a questionnaire, I suggest to avoid that questionnaire while data analysis, right? And absolutely without any logic, don't have a simple guess when you have a missing data, right? So that is what we can do. Then how to analyze qualitative data in SPSS, right? Now in I remember in last webinar also this kind of question was asked, and I explained that with example. So I will do the same thing, right? But I can have two interpretation of this data. The question can be interpreted in two way, right? First interpretation, I don't know what participant is exactly asking, but I have a two interpretation. I will give answer to both the interpretation. So whatever way the participant must have asked will be solved, right? So the first interpretation, that response is received through open-ended question asked in structured questionnaire. So here qualitative data means do not have a close-ended question in my questionnaire. Suppose I have asked one question which is open-ended, remaining question I have close-ended, right? At times when you fill a feedback form or some questionnaire, what do? They simply write a question and they give you blank space. You are free to write whatever you want, right? So here whatever responses I have received as open-ended question, but within the structured questionnaire. So my research is still quantitative, but I have asked an open-ended question, right? And another interpretation, probably the participant might be asking about pure qualitative research, not data not collected through structured questionnaire, probably data collected through in-depth interview or observation, or it may be based on focus group interview or a mini group interview, right? So if researcher has collected data through qualitative methods and he wants to perform pure qualitative research, that is another way of understanding, right? When we talk about point number one, I will show you on the next slide how we can go about with it. But when we talk about point number two, pure qualitative research, right? Then we can talk that rather than SPSS, because in qualitative research you generally want to have a finding and analysis also which is qualitative, right? If you convert everything into data, then your data, you started as a qualitative, you are ending as a quantitative. But suppose you want to do everything as a qualitative, I don't want to use statistical test, I'm gathering data in a qualitative manner, and also I want to analyze and prepare my data, final data in qualitative way, then there are certain other softwares available which can help you in qualitative, right? And one of the best software is NVivo, right? And recently I had a discussion with the management part of Anand Education Foundation. I think there within a fortnight or a span of 2 3 weeks, there another webinar which is coming, especially focusing on NVivo software, how you can use NVivo for content analysis and qualitative research, which is also nowadays going very rapidly, right? So those participants who wants to further understand that NVivo, right, one of our colleague will be taking Jasvinder Kaur. She is very good in this software, so NVivo, so she'll be talking about how to use that software in pure qualitative research, right? So that is the another way. Here I'll be talking about the first part, that I have given an open-ended question in my questionnaire and I have collected data, right? So let us see this. Suppose this is the question I have asked. You can see the question here, right? The question is, in one of the questionnaire, suppose company has asked, what could we improve? Right. What could we improve? Then they have given a blank space. They have not given any option. So it becomes an open-ended question. In a structured question, earlier you might have asked about feedback, right? On something on this, tick on this, tick on this. And one of the question, this is probably the last question you ask, what could we improve? That means show us the area of improvement through which we can improve, right? Now as you know, this is open-ended question, respondent will give answer based on their own particular feeling and whatever they feel. So here there is no control on type of answer you get. Suppose these are the 15 responses we have got, just to understand, right? Option number one, the fees are too high, right? The second, I would like to receive more financial advice. Third, the range of services is too basic. Fourth, the website needs to be updated. The software is not very intuitive, lack of communication, better advice, and so on. And the last is faster response to my queries. These are various options given, these are various answers given by 15 respondents. Now, if you see directly as a simply observe all the 15 variable answers, you won't find anything common in between them, right? So this is 15. Let us assume this is 150, then you have 150 categories you have developed. So now when we want to apply statistics, right, here what I'm assuming, that the participant wants, as he has asked the question how I can go with the qualitative data in SPSS, that means the we are interested in doing quantitative analysis of open-ended question as well, right? I want to do analysis of this. So here only 15. Let us assume I can develop 15 codes. 1 is equal to this, 2 is equal to 3, 4, 5, 6. That is okay. But what if this is 150? Right? There is no point of coding 150. It may be 200, it may be 300, it may be 500. So there is no end. So another way that we can do and go about with this is, we can create group within these responses and then we can code that particular group, Now, when you create a group of responses, it has to be logical, it has to be rational and very carefully done, right? So let us see how we can develop group in this particular responses, right? So the first response I have received is fees are too high. So this is, I think, something with respect to price. When I talk about fees, so that means the respondent is not happy with the price. I would like to receive more financial advice. So here the respondent is interested in advice. That is another group I am having. The range of services is too basic. So respondent is negative or the not happy with the services. I give it a title as service. The website needs to be updated. So suppose this looks more like a problem with technology, so I give it a title as technology. So I have got four groups, right. Then point number 5, the software is not very intuitive. So now I can see again the issue with the technology, so I can again give title to point number 5 as technology, right. Lack of communication. The customer is not happy with communication, so I can give it as a title as communication. Better advice. Now you can see here also respondent is talking about advice, and I have already got one particular response earlier in which I have coded it as advice on second, right. So here it is advice, so again I will write title as advice. I would like to hear more often from my account. So when he likes to hear more, that means he is worried about communication part. So I'll give title as communication. Could use more modern technology. This is now very easy. This with respect to technology. You should send text message instead of email for important information. Right. So here communication issue is there. Could send more useful information. Again communication issue. It would be good to have another way to share documents. So here he wants to have another way of sharing documents. Now I this can be two, either communication or technology, because he is worried about another way of sharing the documents. And when we share the document, it talks about communication. But if I carefully see this, it looks more like he is worried about another way of sharing the document. So I would put it as technology. The website looks too old. Technology issue. It should be cheaper. So here again he is worried about the price. So I will put it at price. And faster response to my queries, right. So he is again worried about the communication. So this is how I have developed. Now I need to understand how many categories I have developed from this, and I can also calculate the frequency. Very simple. So first I have develop a category which is known as price. So price 1 and price 2, I have two frequencies. Then advice here 1, advice 2. Service, only one place. Here only one issue with the service, right. Technology, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 issues with respect to technology. And communication again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now based on this particular categorization, I come to know there are 5 major issues which are coming up when we ask about feedback with respect to our company. The issue which are major are talking about technology as well as communication, right. Now you can go ahead with option number 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 150, 200. Now it may be possible that some responses are very unique and cannot be clubbed in any of these 5, right, because these 5 categories I have developed based on 15 responses. There may be something new which I don't know. Then you should have 6th category which is known as others, right. Then you can club such unique responses which cannot fit on these 5 to 6 categories that we have developed. Then you can simply transfer those particular responses given by respondent to other category, right. So I have now 6 category with me: price, advice, service, technology, communication and others. Now these are 6 categories. Now I have converted my open-ended questions after getting responses into close-ended questions. So now I have 6 categories. So simply the coding becomes very easy for me. I would code price as 1, advice as 2, service as 3, technology as 4, communication as 5, and others as 6. Then whatever may be the response, accordingly I will do coding and I will do data entry in my Excel or SPSS, and then now I can very well do quantitative analysis of this particular question. Right, so this is, but as I told you, you need to be very much careful while devising a category. Right, it may be possible you come up not with 5 but 6 7, but my suggestion is not to go for more than 6 7 categories. Right, otherwise there is no meaning of converting open ended question into close ended question, and some particular responses which are unique and cannot be clubbed in this initial categories, then we should have one category especially, that is known as others, especially when you are converting open ended questions into coding, and then you can perform statistical analysis, right, and this will generate nominal data, and based on that you can go ahead with your SPSS analysis. Right, so this is one thing. One more question. In most of the cases, we would not get normally distributed data. But in most researches, in spite of this situation, we see parametric tests used like ANOVA, correlation, regression. Then why? Okay. Uh, to be very frank with you, if somebody is applying and doing this, right, it is beyond my control, but still it should not be used according to me. Right, whenever you are using parametric data, parametric test, whenever you want to apply, you should first show it to the people who are reading your research paper or who are going through your research paper that I have performed parametric test because my data was normally distributed. Right, but as I told you, certain decisions are taken by researcher, right, so that is their own discretion, because you understand at certain point of time certain limitations are there. If you carefully understood the difference between parametric and non-parametric at that particular time, I told you that certain uh, points like one of the assumption in parametric was the data needs, the sample needs to be collected randomly with random method, right? So random method means probability, right? Now majority of the social science research, right, it is not possible and not practical to select sample randomly with probability method. So when we do not have that opportunity to collect uh, that samples randomly, then we check the normality. Now understand the situation. I have selected sample with non probability method, and now I have checked the normality, and my normality is achieved, then I am performing parametric test. Right, but you have violated one more assumption, that is sample needs to be selected randomly. Right, so why people are using it? A simple answer can be like, as parametric test, the conditions and assumptions are too strict to be applied on many researches. Right, so researcher at times motivated or feel like overlooking these assumptions very rigidly, and they feel like breaking the rules and they go ahead with this situation. Right, but whenever you want to apply parametric or non-parametric test, at least I think you should measure the study the normality of the data, and you should justify it. And when you apply non-parametric also, you should show it in your research paper, as I have not achieved the normality, I am going for non-parametric test. Now it will justify your selection of non-parametric test. Right, then, in your session 2, while explaining chi-square, the data came out to be not normal. Uh, Not chi-square, but normality test. Okay. But when you applied parametric and non-parametric test to same data, yes, results were same. Yes, results were the hypothesis H0 was accepted, right? Means a non-normal data on application of parametric test gave same result as a non-normal data on application of non-parametric test. Then how does applying either matter? Okay. The answer to this question is the selection and application of test are based on assumptions and not on the basis of results, right? Here I show you the result, you saw the result, then this question arises, right? The rationale of selecting test or applying any particular test is not based on result. It may be very well possible that whatever result you are getting in parametric, you will get the same result in non-parametric. Because if it gives you completely different zero is at zero is rejected, then I have a question mark. If Mann Whitney U test is accepting the at zero, rejecting the at zero, and independent sample t test is accepted, then I have a question. If results are different, then why you can say that Mann Whitney U test is a non-parametric version of independent sample t test, right? Technically, it should generate the same result, right? Then only we can say independent sample t test, you have a non-parametric version, Mann Whitney U test. So results should be same. That is good, actually better. So it should not be considered as an opportunity to ask the to create a question in front of results. But it is more rationally we should understand that the selection and application is based on assumption and not on the basis of result. And one more clarification, the result that we discuss is true only for this data set. It may be different for different data set. So we don't know. We have seen only one data set, that is a sample data set which I shared with you, right? We never know, the result may differ with some other test, other data set, right? So simply with one particular example, we should not go ahead with this belief that it is not generating the same different result, right? So if it is not generating different result, I appreciate that it is good, because it should generate same result even if I am going for a non-parametric test. Okay, in reliability, what is composite reliability, and when should we use only Cronbench alpha, and when we need to calculate composite reliability? Okay, composite reliability, at times also known as a construct reliability, is a measure of internal consistency in scale items, same as Cronbench alpha. So composite reliability also measures the internal consistency, and Cronbench alpha also measures the internal consistency, right? To be very frank with you, Cronbench alpha is a older method, right? And composite reliability is a modern method, that is exploratory factor analysis using SPSS or any other software, you calculate Cronbench alpha. But when you calculate confirmatory factor analysis, you go for composite reliability, right? Certain softwares have uh, the basic requirement of running composite reliability only. Certain software will allow you to run both and give result of both, right? So SPSS will allow you to run Cronbench alpha. MOS will allow you to run composite reliability when you are going for composite confirmatory factor analysis. And when you run SEM, again you can have a composite reliability in MOS only, right? When we talk about software like Smart PLS, where PLS SCM is applied, PLS SCM gives you both the values, Cronbench alpha value also and composite reliability value also. Calculating the value, but not much difference in the final result, right? Final result will not be the same, right? So that is also one need to be considered. If I get Cronbench alpha value as 0.12 3, I will not get the same composite reliability as 0.823. It may be slightly vary. If it varies too much, then you should have need certain data surgery, right? So that is what we need to understand, right? So this is how we can use it. Researches with parametric tests are accepted and published easily, where it is not the case with non-parametric test. What is the reason? Okay. Now, this is a very difficult question for me also, because the question is asked to the research fraternity altogether and everyone, right? Still I try to answer very politely from my side, right? I hope this answer may able to justify. uh, a good quality journals won't differentiate based on taste applied. They are more concerned with the correct method and applicability of the test, right? Whenever you study research papers from good journals, they at the time of reviewing your paper will be more concerned whether you applied the correct method or applicability. They will check, right? If you have applied parametric test, they will try to ask you to justify. If you have not applied, they will your non-parametric test, they will ask you to justify. So correct method and the correct process is more important in quality journals, right? And the acceptance of research paper are dependent on many other factors apart from data analysis. So there can be no straightforward answer, right? Analysis is only one part of your research paper, right? And as mentioned by one of my colleague in one of the webinar, he has attended, he has met one particular uh, editor in chief of a very popular journal, and according to him, data analysis only contributes 12% to 15% whether to accept or not, right? So data analysis is not the only thing that will decide whether my paper will be accepted or not. There are many other things: the writing style, the quality of writing, the language, the steps, the research methodology you have applied, the concept, the novelty of the paper, and there are so many things that will be considered while paper will be accepted or not, right? So I personally, if I tell you, I have not observed this phenomenon that paper with parametric test are accepted more, right? Still, if as a participant you have observed, then I would only like to say that whether worried about parametric or non-parametric, you should try to follow the process rather than the type of test, right? Can we convert a non-normal data to normal data to some means? Okay, so the question is, suppose I have checked the normality and I have not achieved the normality. Right now, I want to perform t-test or on one way ANOVA means parametric test, and my data is not normal. So can we do something to this? Yes, there are certain guidelines available, right? Some suggested steps which are given by many people in research, right? And these steps, step number one, the first thing you should do is increase the sample size. When you are not achieving the normal data, right, normality in your data, the first thing you should do, that you should increase the sample size. It may change the data from non-normality to normality. Again, you have to check. Now, how much sample size you should increase, and that is again a subjective matter, right? What is your current sample size? How much you should increase? And these are all the subjective things. No clear-cut guidelines are available, but you should increase your sample size in a way that you can collect more data, and probably as you increase the sample size, the assumption is like you will get as you reach near to the population, right? So you have certain more qualified responses as compared to a smaller sample size. So that is one way you can do. Another, you can identify and remove outliers. Suppose you have the feeling that I have already collected huge number of samples, right? Now I don't want to increase my sample size. I want to have the good sample size. Now another way you can go is identify and remove outliers. In your normality test, when I saw you one particular graph, if you remember, the dots are available. The dots were far from the line. The dots which are far from the line are known as outliers, right? So you can identify and remove these outliers. There are various ways through which you can identify outliers in SPSS also, right? So simply you can explore the explore tab that I used while checking the normality, if you remember, right? I will send you today my PPTs and go to that particular normality test. When you click on explore tab, it will allow you to identify outlier also. There is one tick you have to do. So identify those outlier, it will give you the respondent numbers, the respondent number 7, 10, 9, 11, whatever the number it will give. You can remove responses from those respondents, and it will try to give your make your data normal. So remember, this another step you can do, right? Outliers. Third, especially applicable more in financial data, many people do it as far as stock market data or other IPO data or something like that. You can apply log on your data. If you are not achieving normality, you can apply log. You can convert your data into log method. There are also some way of doing it. I will not go in detail, but you can apply log into your data and you can try to achieve the normality. Is there any way to reduce data entry error? Right. So data entry error means suppose respondent has ticked on 2, I have my by mistake written 3. Right. So this is the data entry error which will be carry forward. So this is even dangerous than missing data, because missing data will tell you, okay, here the data is missing. Data entry error you will won't be able to identify easily, because you have made the mistake and you don't know that how I have made mistakes. And still there are certain general guidelines which I will share with you, right? The best way to reduce data entry error is prioritize accuracy over speed. Generally, when we collect data for our research or PhD thesis, right, with lot of difficulty and lot of time, we reach to a level whereby now we have collected our data. So it is a human psychology that now I don't want to waste my time at all, and I quickly want to do data analysis, right? Because as such it has taken a lot of time to reach to this level. So now data entry should be done very rapidly, and it should be completed as soon as possible so that I can proceed with the data analysis. So I will prioritize speed over accuracy, and when I increase my speed, and I chances of generating lot of data entry error are there. So I suggest you take good amount of time while doing data entry. Do not be in hurry to do data entry. Prioritize accuracy over speed, right? Don't be in hurry, I want to finish data entry in 2 days, 3 days. Take time, right? As such, think like, suppose I have not collected my data in next 15 days. Similarly, I have not got data, so I am not doing data entry. Assume that still your data collection is going on, and give priority to accuracy. That is one way. Second, standardized data entry process. Follow a fixed pattern, right? When you are entering data, you should follow a fixed pattern. How I would start, which question and which particular area, what should be the way of pattern which I enter my data, right? That is, everybody can develop their own pattern and own standardized way of entering the data that you should do. And you should follow a fixed pattern and standardized data entry process. You should decide your own process, nobody else should decide. But one should decide 10 questionnaires, you do data entry, you will come to know which is the best way according to my ability, and then you should follow the fixed pattern. When you follow the fixed pattern, anything which is deviated you will be able to identify. Put formula in Excel, right? There is another way, if you know, then you can go ahead. Highlight other than prescribed value, right? Suppose I am coding male and female, right? Now I know I have to code only 1 and 2. Right. So now I can put the formula in that particular column, that any value other than 1 and 2, if written, it should highlight as red. Right. There is an Excel formula available for this. That only, apart from prescribed value, anything you will write, it will highlight with a different color. Right. So when you put this formula in Excel and you keep on doing data entry 1 2 1 2 or whatever, right? So any other digit if you will write, it will show you with a different color and it will highlight, or it will show a back, it will change the background color of the cell, right? That formula also you can put. But remember, this will only help you if you have done mistake of doing data entry other than the prescribed number. But if I do mistake within 1 and 2, it will not tell me. So instead of 1, if I am writing 2, then it will not highlight. But it will help me if instead of writing 1 or 2, if I am writing 3, it will highlight. So still it is helpful, right? Completely it is not error free, but still it will be helpful to you by allowing you to identify certain errors at the time of data entry. Another suggestion is don't stretch yourself, right? Take regular breaks, fix the number. Okay, in one sitting, I will do data entry of only 25 questionnaires or 50 questionnaires. I will not do more than that. Even if I have time, even if I am mentally ready, I will not do it. Take regular breaks while data entry. Suppose I have fixed a number of 25 questionnaires, right? So 25 questionnaires, I will make sets of 25 questionnaires. Right. One my 25 questionnaire over, I will stop there. I will take a break, half an hour, 1 hour, whatever other activity I want to do, I will do. Again, I will come back. Because if you will stretch too much, then these are the actually dealing with figures. Then everything will look like similar to you, right? Once you stretch yourself. So take regular breaks, right? That you should do. And the best way, right, if possible, collect data online through Google Form or some other software. It will directly convert your data into Excel. So here the best way is, I'm not trying to removing the error of data entry. I am removing completely data entry as far as possible, right? But I have kept it last as a suggestion because I know in every research and every topic and every state and every place, it is not practically possible to collect data online. Still, if you can have different ways of collecting online and offline both, you can go ahead with it, right? So that is what one need to know, that data collection which we are doing is online. If you can have 50%, 30% questionnaire also you have collected responses online, it will help you to reduce your data entry burden. Then one more question, please demonstrate multiple tick coding in SPSS, right? So multiple tick coding, the multiple tick question was this: please specify reason for changing mobile, right? Previous mobile was out of order, outdated technology offered by company, right? So this is the multiple tick question we had in our questionnaire. So let me show you and let me take you to this file, right? So question 2a, first was out of order. I would label as out of order. Values, I will put it as 0 for no, 1 for yes. That means this is a multiple tick. It will generate nominal data. Right. Question 2b, outdated technology. Sorry, outdated features, then technology and offer by company. Outdated features. Technology and offer. Question 2, question 2c, question 2d. This is nominal, nominal, nominal. I can copy this and I can paste it. Right. So this is how we can do coding. You can see here all the three. 0 is equal to no, 1 is equal to yes, and this is how we can do coding. And how we can do data entry when we have a questionnaire with us, right? When we have something like we have not Just suppose the respondent has not ticked on previous mobile was out of order. He has not ticked here, I will write 0. He has ticked here, I will write 1. This is how we go ahead with it, right? Okay. So these are all the questions which were asked, and my answer to those questions to the best of my knowledge and ability, right? So now if you have any query with respect to this explanation or any other query, you can ask me. Okay, there are certain messages. Okay, only recorded with you. My question is, if all variable get 0.000 is good for result in all question, please do suggest. Sir, you are already there online available. Can you tell me
Yes, sir.
with which particular test you are talking about?
It's regarding ANOVA, sir.
ANOVA, okay. So there is
Yes, sir.
so if you get 0.000, it is fine. Absolutely, the p value is less than 0.05. So your h1 will be fail to reject. So the result will show this. As you have asked this question, I want to slightly add my one point in answer. Right, there are many researchers who are worried about. Suppose I give you one example. Okay, suppose I am doing a survey on customer satisfaction, then researchers are
Yes.
worried, what will happen if my result shows as customer are dissatisfied, right? Or or will it show that all my customer are satisfied? What will be the implication, right? So here what I would like to suggest you all of you is that results are not under the control of researcher. Whatever result come, we should simply present it with full of honesty. If in all my questions the h0 is accepted and no significance association comes, that is not my fault as a researcher. That is also I am adding into the world of research. Okay, in my research no association is found, and it may be contradicting to the earlier researcher. So whatever the value comes, it is good or bad, we should not consider it is good or bad. Whatever value comes, your result will be according to it. Whatever result comes, you should report the same result.
Yeah, yeah, it's okay, sir. Thank you. But I have doubt. So I was take 10 questions
Hmm.
with different factors. The
Hmm.
all questions comes significance levels.
So that is what I told you. Whatever
Yes.
the result comes is based on the data you have collected. So as a
Okay.
researcher, we should show the utmost care and honesty while collecting the data. Right.
Okay.
It, results are beyond our control. Right.
Okay.
If
Okay, sir.
if if we take the result completely reverse, suppose no significance has come in your entire, then it is still not your problem. Right. As a
Okay.
researcher, right? You should only take care, you should be well organized and honest while collecting data. That is what we can do as a researcher.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other question? Can you explain how to import CSV file and analysis? Okay, the same way in which we have import in Excel, the same way you can import the CSV file. There is no other way. There is no difference in that particular thing, right? First, you have need to have a CSV file, and you can import the CSV file. Ultimately, once the data comes in SPSS, then it has no effect whether it was originally put in Excel or originally put in CSV file. Once it is in SPSS, it is automatically imported in CSV file. Right. Right. So, any other question, anyone?
Sir, can I ask a question about validity, though it is not related to webinar? Just is validity for questionnaire different than validity for model, and both should be done in any research?
Not coming to me. Validity. Yes, you are asking something with respect to validity.
Sir, I'm trying to ask, is the validity of questionnaire different from validity of model in the sense? that in every research work we have to separately calculate or separately find out the validity of questionnaire as well as the model, or is, only finding the validity of questionnaire is sufficient?
Sir, to be very simple, if I give you answer very simply, the model, the questionnaire which you are designing, right, is purely and purely based on your model, right? So all the in model what you are defining, in model you are defining your constructs, and your questionnaire contains the variable which are measuring your constructs. So there is no difference in that.
Okay, right. Absolutely. Rightly pointed out. So that means if we have validated our questionnaire, that means our model is validated.
So you are ultimately, sir, validating your model only, and it
Okay.
once your model is validated, your questionnaire is at no question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sir, it is also relevant to that reliability tests use only Likert scale questionnaire, or we can use any other
In which particular test, sir?
reliability, validity,
Yes, reliability. You can only have a Likert scale, sir.
Likert scale only.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
There are many people I have seen initially when I was also new in this, right? We at times select all the variables and put it into the right box, and we run the reliability. And I pointed out in that my video also that software doesn't apply its mind. It will give you the Cronbench alpha value and nominal data also, right?
Yes.
So we should not analyze that. You should run Cronbench alpha reliability, internal consistency only on Likert scales.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's nice.
Ajay sir, there is another webinar. I think Anant is planning on exploratory and confirmatory, right? So it will clarify your lot of doubts on with respect to the reliability and validity part. So you will definitely receive some program modules from them. So you can go ahead with this, right?
You are the
Sorry.
instructor, sir?
Yes, yes, Namrata madam.
Actually, I'm Nitin Doshi sir on the behalf of that Namrata Kulkarni. I want to know, in a Likert scale, as you mentioned about the reliability, how to estimate the item difficulty in the Likert scale? Can you do that?
Sorry, sir. How
Item
to?
difficulty. Item difficulty.
Item difficulty.
Yeah.
Acha. Now, when you have that, I think I have covered in that video. When you have a scale item deleted, right?
Okay.
When you calculate Cronbench alpha, you need to
Huh.
tick an additional tick that if scale item deleted, that will
Okay.
give you an idea. Okay, if I remove one particular item from my entire scale, what
Uh-huh.
kind of will it have any impact on Cronbench alpha, and whether the impact will be positive or negative? That will guide me whether what to do with that particular item. If by deleting that item my Cronbench alpha increases, I can go ahead with it in that particular if my research is such, right? But generally when you go for a simple research and you are not applying CFA or something like that, you should not delete the item if your Cronbench alpha value is good.
Okay. So that is the only thing that I can look into when I search what is the item difficulty
Yes,
level.
yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, from my side, I have one doubt regarding general. So, what is
Yeah.
the difference in between ANOVA and MONOVA, and what is the major difference, sir? Yeah.
ANOVA and MONOVA, sir, as I tell you, certain questions are beyond the, we can say, boundary of this webinar. Still,
Yes, sir.
when we talk about MONOVA, it is still about multivariate analysis of variance, right?
Yes.
While ANOVA only talks about the analysis of variance, right? So, MONOVA, when you apply, you need to have a multiple variables under the study, right? And ANOVA, you can have even on one particular variable or group of variables you can have. That is the basic difference.
Can you give a small example on that to let me understand?
Sir, I would suggest you to either contact me in person or you can search
Okay,
on
okay, sir.
internet,
Okay,
or
sir. Okay, sir.
right, because it something that is may not be important, the other participant may not find it lucrative,
Okay,
but
sir.
I
Okay,
will
sir.
definitely tell you in person. There was one another question was asked to me by one participant yesterday with respect to cluster analysis, right? She is doing her PhD and she is interested in cluster analysis. I gave the same answer to her also, that I won't be able to cover something with respect to cluster analysis in question answer session, because it may not be to the interest of other participants. So I am extremely sorry, sir.
Okay, okay, sir. Okay, sir. I can
Right.
understood that. Okay, thank you.
Uh, but there is another webinar, I think Anant is planning on EFA and cluster analysis also, right? So those who are into marketing, HR or other social science field can understand that also, right? So this is that, can we get a session on questionnaire preparation? That is one particular question, Rekha man. And Rekha madam, that particular session was already completed with it before 15 days. I don't know when that session can be repeated. I would request the organizers to update as in when they plan this session as a repeat session. But it is negative sense. You have mentioned that null hypothesis in normality testing is kind of positive, but it is negative sense in all others. Why is it so? Is it because in social science it is difficult to find normal data? Yes, the normality is supposed to be having a different kind of mentioning of hypothesis. It should always be negative on the H1 and positive on the H0, and the reason is also given by you, that social science it is difficult, but it is a general practice which was used by statisticians. Is that coming session will be useful for finance students? If you're talking about the cluster analysis and EFA, not much useful, right, to finance students, right? It is more useful to HR and marketing people or some other people doing in social science. So if now no question, anyone? Okay, so there is a message from Anant Education for finance people. They are having something with respect to econometric. They are planning, so you can attend that econometric session. That will be helpful to you as a finance student. Very soon, I'll be sharing my PPT of both the sessions, and I'll also share some additional material which can be helpful to you in this basic statistical analysis, right? So that was all from my side. If now nobody is having any question, I would again appreciate the efforts put in by the organizers, and most importantly the participants, without whom the session won't be successful, right? So let us keep on learning, and we'll get in touch. If any one of you have any further doubt with respect to this webinar, you can send me. When I will send you my PPT,